For the third year and counting, Richard Skipper has been celebrating the artists you love.
And what are some of the things that you've really
run out of time, and we've got to talk about your latest.
I want to go back a little bit, first of all, and celebrate a true legend.
Richard Skipper is all about celebrating life, art, and his guest body of work.
And did you pursue performing opportunities while you were in high school?
Please join us while he showcases these diverse and talented individuals. Here's Richard Skipper.
Happy Saturday, everyone, and welcome from snowy New York. Who or what are you celebrating today? I don't know about you, but I am celebrating the fact that New York is coming back even in the midst of a blizzard. 2 years ago today, all of our theaters shut down. The longest shutdown in the history of Broadway. Today is also the birthday of Liza Minnelli. And I couldn't think of a better person to be here today than Albert Polan. And I am so thrilled that he said yes to me when I asked him to be here. This is not the first time that he's been sitting in this chair here. He was here when we celebrated Peter Allen's birthday. There's a connection there as well. Albert, I'm going to share something with you. Years ago, it was Liza's 40th birthday, and I used to do singing telegrams, and she was doing the Rink on Broadway, and I, knowing it was her birthday, being the kid that I was, and this is going to talk about some of the parallels that you and I have in common. I knew that it was a birthday, so I contacted the house manager at the Martin Beck Theater, now the Hirschfeld Theater, and I said that I worked for Eastern Onion Singing Telegrams, and I wanted to deliver a singing telegram to Liza Minnelli. And they verified that it was indeed her birthday. And I sent myself to Liza for her birthday. And you have a similar story regarding her mom in terms of how you got in touch with her. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But before we get to that, I want to tell everyone about this amazing book, Stages. We're actually going to give away a copy this afternoon. And I want everyone, whether you win a copy or not, to get this book, because whether you're in the theater or not, if you have a love for the theater, you have to read this book. It's just incredible, and you are just an incredible man, and I can't stop cavelling about you, to not only yourself, but to everyone I talk to. Albert Polan, I celebrate you today.
Thank you so much, Richard. I'm so honored.
So who or what are you celebrating today besides Liza Minnelli?
Well, I'm celebrating that we only have 2 inches of snow. So fortunately, I don't think I have to pay a plow bill.
That's a good thing. And you were concerned that, I mean,
of the snow without the expense.
Well, let me ask you this. How and why did you end up in Wappinger Falls? You don't mind if I tell people that that's where you live, do you?
You already have. Well, I began looking for an apartment. I never owned anything. And in around 1996, I decided it was time that I owned something. And I was doing very well. And I began looking at apartments, and it was the beginning of the boom. And I was about to close on an apartment, and they pulled it out from under me and sold it to somebody else for $50,000 more 2 weeks later. But I kept looking. The final thing I looked at was a loft in Soho with no windows for a mere $550,000. And I said, I'm finished. And I went to this party at the New York Public Library, of all places, thrown by Anita Waxman. And they had, they had fortune tellers and astrologers there. So I decided to go to an astrologer, and she said, you are going to have a home. I said, oh, I've been looking for apartments. She said, no, a home. You're going to have a home. You will have it this summer, And then I saw an ad in the Observer for this house that I'm in. It said, French provincial mini estate, romantic. And I thought, oh, I think that would do. I had not driven in 35 years, so I hired a car and driver to come out here. I think the car and driver impressed the owners, because they seemed to really be taken with me. And my friend Peter Schneider was the Tony Awards were the next night, and he won for The Lion King. And the following morning, I had breakfast with him and his wife Hope at the Carlisle, and I told them the news. So it was a grand weekend, and the people called me Monday afternoon and said, "We have chosen you." So here I am.
And here you are. I talk about it. Now that's a Tony winner right there. I'm going to start with a random question today because I like to do that. And then we're going to start on this road that led from Indiana to Wappinger Falls and everything in between. And so the random question that I haven't even looked at is, if you could be famous, what would you be famous for? Well, you're already famous. If you could be famous for something else, what would you be famous for?
Oh, it's such a good question. I guess being a talent agent or a talent manager. I worship talent, and that had a lot to do with the career that I've had. So I guess that.
Well, I think that is a good starting off point, because you and I both come. Well, I'm assuming it was a small town. I grew up in a small town, but when I'm reading about your childhood, there are a lot of similarities in terms of the things that you and I were doing as young boys and who we were as young boys and what our sensibilities were as young boys. I asked for a photograph of you as a 5-year-old, and I love this. And there you are. You haven't changed a bit, as I said. And I asked for this photograph because, to me, it's that time before life begins to tell you who and what you should be or who you should not be. And I want you to tell us who this little boy is, Albert the Menace, as you said in your picture that you said.
Well, I look at it and I see the same mission statement that I've had all my life and still have, and that is fun and mischief.
So, early on, you had this desire. You just wanted to be in the spotlight. And I love the fact that in my life, I had a Miss Marion. And Miss Marion was my next door neighbor who was my sounding board. I would go, thank God I had Miss Marion, because I don't think I would have survived in South Carolina. I would go over, play Yahtzee, drink iced tea, play these games with her, listen to Broadway cast albums. And she was the one who said, go for your dreams. But you had several of these women in your life. Talk about the Miss Marions that were in your life, and you refer to them in your book.
Well, I played with dolls, and when I was about 5.5, my mother said, boys don't play with dolls. You're almost 6 now. And she took my dolls away. And I really had, I communicated with the dolls. They were my company, and they understood me, which I didn't feel an emotional attachment to my parents, unfortunately. And they were very decent people, but there just wasn't an emotional, string there. And so I turned to the ladies of the neighborhood, as Frank Lesser once said. Mm-hmm. And I went around and would knock on the door and say, do you have time to chat? And they would let me in. Their husbands were away at work, and they would give me toast or a piece of chocolate, and gradually I began doing a little magic show. I would go in and put on a magic show. And when I was in the 4th grade, I had a wonderful teacher in Indianapolis named Helen Milligan. And she saw my desire for show business, and she was the first person to encourage me. She gave me an hour every Friday to put on a show. Mm-hmm. And that was just amazing. I remember, it was very different than I was walking in a field with one of my uncles in Illinois, and he called me Ab, and he said, well, Ab, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I said, I'm going to be in show business, Uncle Raymond. And he pulled his arm away from me. And that was the end of the relationship.
I had many of those moments. It's very interesting that you bring up this thing about dolls. I saw a show many years ago, a cabaret show, and the entertainer in the show said that he didn't know that it was not okay for boys to play with dolls until he was 6 years old, when his teacher told him that it was not okay. So obviously, you have these dolls in your life. Your parents obviously gave you these dolls. At what point and then your mom decides, was it because you were starting school that she didn't think it was appropriate, or what was the cutting off point for both you and the dolls?
I think that she probably felt that it was time that I began to develop masculine traits of some kind, but see, the dolls made a comeback as marionettes.
Mm-hmm.
I put strings on them, and I had a marionette show. So, once again, I prevailed.
So your mind was made up. You were going to, one way or the other, you were going to get away from there. You were going to move on and everything. But I love when you were older, and this brings us to, this year also is the 100th birthday of Judy Garland. And this story blows my mind. You were able, your parents let you go off to see A Star Is Born. And you went off, I guess that was the first time you went off by yourself to see a major motion picture. And you were able, luckily, to see it before it was cut to smithereens.
Yes.
I
was at the Indiana Theater, which was downtown. And so that's why, it was the first time for me. And I sat through it 3 times. And when I got home, my parents had called the police because I had been gone 10 hours. But as I say, it was too late. I had escaped. Judy was my escape hatch. I used to look at my life as before and after A Star Is Born.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, until the AIDS pandemic, and then I looked at it as before and after AIDS. But that was, seeing her in A Star Is Born was just a major milestone in my life, and I felt then, and I feel now, that she's the greatest talent that I've ever encountered.
Well, for me, I grew up for the yearly showings of The Wizard of Oz on TV. That was what it was for me, and she grabbed me on a level. I was 8 years old when she passed away. And I threw myself on the floor. If my mom's watching, she will attest to this. I threw myself on the floor and I screamed, "I can't go on." And my mom grabbed me and said, "You don't even know this woman. What has gotten into you?" And my mom was like shaking me, saying, "You don't know her." What was it about her that grabbed you? And of course, you were seeing the adult Judy Garland.
Yes.
That grabbed you on such a level.
Well, I feel, as I say, that she's the most talented person I've ever encountered, and I don't consider singing and dancing and acting to be talents. I consider them to be skills.
Mm-hmm.
Talent is the source that informs those things.
Wow.
And to me, she had the richest source of anyone I've ever encountered. I would even say it was divine, and as years go by, my appreciation of her grows and grows and grows. I was so blessed to see her 12 times in person, including Carnegie Hall. Elaine Stritch talked about being lucky to live during the time when Judy Garland was performing. Well, that's how I felt. No matter what happened, there was always the possibility that, I'll see Judy again.
Well, I want to go back, though, that first time that you saw her, and obviously you were riveted to your seat to sit through every showing. You probably would have continued to sit there if the movie showed through the night. But you had to, were buses still running when the movie was over?
Oh, yes, that's how I got home.
So when you walked in, what was the reaction from your parents? They called the police. Obviously, they must have been mortified.
Oh, they just, they just, well, we've called the police. That was like what people did in the Midwest when your children were late,
So who were you able to share this experience with, as far as your friends were concerned, that you had been basically ordained by Judaism, as a dear friend of mine calls it?
Yes, well, you know, I started a fan club for her.
Well, I want to get to that story because it's such a great story in your book, without giving away too much. But I love the steps that it took, because I didn't realize what it took to start a fan club. But you had several friends that you wanted to start the fan club with.
I drafted them. I wanted to join a fan club, but there weren't any, which I was shocked. So I found out there was a book about how you do a fan club. So I sent away for it. And, it wasn't a bunch of people screaming. I mean, a fan club is a political organization. It publishes journals 4 times a year. And in each journal, there are the names of 3 movie magazines, and the members were encouraged to write to them all and change their handwriting and send them to relatives. So the postmarks came from different cities, asking for covers and stories. And whoever wrote the most got a personal note from Judy and a gift that I bought with my allowance.
But when you found out there were no fan clubs, you wanted to start a fan club, only to find out that in order to start a fan club, you needed essentially the endorsement of the Star in order to do this.
Yes, to make it official. And I wrote letters to all kinds of addresses that were published here and there, and finally I had a meeting we only had 3 members after 3 months, and we had a summit meeting in my house to determine what we were going to do. And my parents were out, and one of them suggested, "Why don't we call her?" And I said, "Yes, let's call her." So I typed up a script. And in 1955, which is when this happened, a long distance call was an event. If there were 2 a year in a family, it was major. They were very much like the long distance call and Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yes, I'm thinking the same thing. Yes.
and we got an operator on the phone who was as excited about it as we were, and I had a list of places to try and find her phone number, because we didn't have her. I mean, it's amazing that this even happened to me. Anyway, we called several places. We finally called Warner Brothers. I told her to ask for personnel, and they gave us the number. And the phone rang, and a woman answered, and the operator said, "Long distance is calling for Judy Garland." Just a moment, please.
But I love in the book, excuse me, I love in the book when you say that even the operator got excited that Judy Garland was going to be on the phone.
She did. She was with it all the way. So this low musical voice said hello, and I started reading my script. I said, "Miss Garland, my name is Al Poland, and I'm president of a fan club for you." And Judy said, "A fan club for me? How wonderful." And I dropped the script and said, "Oh, Judy, I love you so much." And from there, the conversation just went on, and she was wonderful. And she gave me her address immediately. She said she would send the letter, and it arrived 2 weeks later. And within a few months, we had 3,000 members, and a British chapter was begun, which exists to this day. And after the first year, I had to give it up because I was in high school, and there were 60 letters a day arriving. And I had schoolwork that had to be done. And there was a woman in it who had tried to start one for her in 1949 and was told by her management that one was not needed because her hold on the public was sufficient. So I gave the club to her. Her name was Pat McMath. And I would say that she made it into the best fan club of all. And I think, the origins of the Garland cult were in that club,
Well, let me ask you this. When you, in your book, you said that when you first saw her, and after coming out of that experience, you felt this immediate connection to her, and that you felt that you were going to help her. What was it that you were feeling? I mean, you didn't know a lot about her history at that time, or did you? And you were just connecting something from what you saw on screen.
I had read a lot of, I had, the reason I wanted to see A Star is Born is I had read all the advanced publicity and saw that her life was, very, very intriguing, hectic life,
Mhm.
unlike my life in,
Uh-huh.
in Indianapolis. Um, and when I saw her, there was something about her. There is something about her that makes us feel needed when we're watching her. It's innate. It's just
Mhm.
there, and I felt that. And as I told people, she's the most talented person I ever saw, but I also felt she needed my help.
Mhm. Well, I want to, focus on you for a moment. When many of us in this business, we have dreams, we have desires, we say we're going to go after something. A lot of times, those dreams don't get beyond the front door for a lot of people. But for you and a lot of people, they do. Uh, what was the driving force that propelled you to New York?
Oh my God, I couldn't wait to get out of the Midwest for one thing. I wanted to go into show business. I had been dreaming of show business, since I was a young kid. I mean,
But can I ask you what specifically? I mean, and again, all this is covered in the book because we get a real sense of who and what your life was all about. But for those who haven't read the book yet, if you can give us a sense of what that world would mean to you for this Midwesterner, and getting to New York, what you imagined it would be, and what those first days were, because things started to unfold for you in a rather interesting way when you got here.
well, I was smitten with all of the people that we think of as being part of the golden age of television. Burns and Allen, Eddie Cantor, Jack Benny, Bob Hope. All of these people came from vaudeville, and they had developed their two for the people style in
Mhm.
vaudeville. They were seasoned, 40 weeks on the road, and I just fell in love with all of them, and I felt like they wanted to be loved, and so did I.
Mhm.
So I felt like there was a community there where the people cared for each other and loved each other. I remember, when the Jewish comics would come on stage, they would kiss each other on the cheek, and I thought that was so wonderful. I didn't think of it as sexual, obviously. My mother did. Oh, those two men kissing on the cheek, but I just thought it was an act of genuine lovingness, and so I couldn't wait to join it. And I came to New York to be a musical comedy star, and as you can see, my plan failed. But
But you did. I mean, you did have some. You did work in theater,
oh, I did. I was in a tour of Sound of Music, and I
and you understudied Rolf in The Sound of Music. You did other roles.
and I was in a nightclub act called the Wing Victory Chorus. We were supposed to be veterans of the Korean War, not that any of us would have qualified to be in the
Oh,
service.
Albert, I auditioned for them. I'll tell you that story sometime.
Well, I had a blast. I was like 19 years old. It was the perfect time, for it. But I didn't like the audition process, and I believe in pursuing your dream, but I also believe in reading the road signs. And the road signs were directing me to go in another direction, and that was toward producing and management. And I read them, and I went, and it was the right place for me. I could not have had a career that I loved more.
Well, let's talk about those road signs because a lot of people, I too am aware of road signs when they come up. That it's time when it's time to make that detour, when it's time to make that change. The first road sign that comes along, and did that road sign hit you square in the eyes, or was it a blurry road sign? How did that road sign present itself to you?
Well, I realized that I hated auditions, and a friend of mine played the piano for me when I did an audition for Julius Monk, and I thought I had done a nice audition, and I said, "So how was I?" He said, you were radiating pure hatred.
Oh
And
my
we were walking along Central Park South because it was the Plaza 9 in the Plaza Hotel. I put my sheet music in the trash basket and said, I'm done. And about that time I went to work with a friend of mine named Max Jacobs,
Mm-hmm.
whose father, was one of those children of Jewish immigrants who started industries that didn't even exist before. And he owned 900 different businesses, including the Cincinnati Royals, Cincinnati Bruins, airports, racetracks. I mean, he was a mogul. And he was really I cut my teeth on Mr. Jacobs, LM Jacobs. And fortunately, I had always stood up to my father, and that prepared me for Mr. Jacobs. And Mr. Jacobs prepared me for all the moguls that I dealt with after that. But and Max was an actor, and we decided we wanted to produce a show. So I went around and interviewed producers and did a notebook on how you produce a show. And Max's father unfortunately died, and Max had to go back to Buffalo to jump into the family business for a few years. But I was smitten, and so a friend of mine, David Cryer, and I teamed up to produce a college tour of the Fantasticks, which became the first national tour of the Fantasticks. It was the first off-Broadway show to play first-class theaters. I was 24.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an adventure, and we just learned as we went, and everybody was like, it was a pioneer effort, and everybody's spirit was right with us.
And you were pretty much creating the wheel and the foundation for the way to do this. And you were very much also in those early stages of the early movement of off-Broadway. It was a very different vibe and a feel from what off-Broadway is today.
I just loved off-Broadway. I went to an equity negotiation when we were doing our first show, Now is the Time for All Good Men. And I looked around at these people and I said, these are my people and this is my community. And off-Broadway owned my heart for decades. And I did some very exciting shows, worked with some very exciting talent, and and had had an up and down relationship with Lucille Lortel that I wouldn't trade for the world. And my Patrick Pacheco wrote a review of my book, and he said Lucille Lortel steals every page she is on.
And why wouldn't she? But these people, well, it's just such an incredible. You can't stop reading it. It's like these, and Michael Riedel, God bless him, and I love the introduction. Just grabs you as well, and I love him describing coming up and sitting down. And you're also very much a part of his book, Razzle Dazzle. But I want to talk about the people who were shaping you. And you were also, Albert, you were shaping their lives as well. It was just this alchemy that was happening in that world at that time. And people were really, the world of theater was changing because there was so much experimentation going on at that time in a way that I don't think people are taking those chances anymore in theater because of the commercialism.
Yeah, well, it's too expensive to take those kind of chances. I went where I wanted to go, and I not by any design, but I ended up working off Broadway, and Broadway, because different things that were happening in those places fascinated me and interested me. And someone like Ellen Stewart, Ellen and I became very close, and we fought. She was a triple Scorpio, so what are you going to do?
And I know what that means.
And when my book was published in 2019, the Schubert Organization gave me a book party. Phil Smith and Bob Wankel gave me a book party in the Schubert penthouse, and as I sat there, as I was sitting there, I realized that I had been with these people for 50 years. Jerry Schoenfeld and Bernie Jacobs had been with me since the beginning of my career. We had done 10 shows together. And as you say, they had been my advisors, my very dear friends, very, very dear friends. And yes, they shaped my career. But as you mentioned, I sort of shaped theirs a little bit. I brought them.
Oh, you certainly did.
I brought them downtown to produce Little Shop of Horrors.
Well, I want to talk about that. When Little Shop of Horrors came along, and I remember the vibe of this show opening. Take us back to that and the Little Shop of Horrors opening, and this show, which was such a juggernaut off Broadway, and really took the off Broadway scene by storm in a way that I don't think any other off Broadway show had ever done before.
Well, Kyle Rennick was the head of the WPA Theater where it was originally produced, and he called me up and he said, "I've got a show down here that 25 producers are running after, and I'd like you to come and see it. I'm thinking of you to be the general manager." And I went down that night, and as I said, it was a hit from the first note. You know, hits have a swagger that other things don't have. It's just there, you know. And I went home and I was sharing offices with Cameron McIntosh at the time. I called Cameron at midnight. I don't know what time it was in London, but you know, I said, "You have to do this. You know, there are 25 people after this. You have to do this." And he said, "Call Bernie." You know, so I called Bernie Jacobs the next morning and said, "Cameron and I would love you to come and see this. Can you possibly come tonight?" And he actually canceled some other plans and came. And he said he would call me the next day, which was a Saturday, and let me know. And he called and he said it wasn't his cup of tea, and my heart just sank, you know. And but he ended the conversation saying, "But if you want us to come along, we might consider it." And I thought, well, I have to follow up on that, you know. So on Monday morning, I put a call into him, and I got a call back that I will never forget. He said, "Albert, it's Bernie. I have David Geffen on the line. We want the show."
You went, who? People dream of those calls.
He said, "How much will it cost?" And I hadn't done a budget. I said, "Oh, $350." You know, I just pulled the figure out of my hat, and it turned out to be fine. And he said, "Do you want to come along, David?" And David Geffen said, "Whatever you say, Bernie." And of course, David ended up doing the beautiful cast album produced by Phil Ramone, and the film, the movie, you know.
I mean, was there talk of that show ever moving to Broadway at that time? And if that was ever a talk, I think that would have been a mistake, number one. But was there, I mean, were there people that were pushing for that to happen?
Well, it was only natural that the Schuberts, being the top theater owners on Broadway, that they would think of it moving. However, Howard Ashman and I had a meeting with Bernie, and Howard was adamant, as was I, that it not move. We wanted to see a long run down there than an abbreviated run in a larger theater. And as Edith Oliver said in her New Yorker review, it's the perfect off-Broadway show, and that's what we thought. And Bernie listened. He never brought it up again. And it ran 5.5 years.
Oh my God! And it was all word of mouth. I mean, but thank God, don't you miss those days before the internet? And
it was just, you know, it was just like riding the crest of an ocean wave, you know, just propelling you on and on and on, you know. And it was.
Well, I want to talk about another big ocean wave that you rode, and we talked a little bit about this the last time, and let's talk a little bit about the history of you from the first time you saw Peter Allen. We talked about this on the other show, but a lot of people may not have saw that show. Leading up to Boy from Oz.
Well, I was a big fan of Felicia Saunders. And I was fortunate to be able to go to the Bonsoir, as she called it, the basement on 8th Street, and see her whenever she was there. She usually stayed for 6 months at a time. And I went to see her, and she was great as always. And the little MC came on. and said, "We have a special treat for you tonight." In their first New York appearance, direct from Australia, Chris and Peter Allen. And they came out, and I thought that they looked like a cruise ship act, and Peter was kind of winking at the audience as if to say, of course, that we are kidding. And little did I know, but Judy was sitting behind me at the bar. I had no idea she had brought them there, And the next time I saw him, Glenn Roven took me to the bottom line. He mainly wanted me to see Peter perform "Quiet Please, There's a Lady on the Stage," which was originally written for Julie Wilson, but it ended up being written about Judy. And he was great in the bottom line. It was a whole different thing. He was finding his persona. He really was. And a year later, I saw him in Central Park with a group of 8,000 people. And he had that swagger that just smacked against the back of the row of the people, and he really he was a knockout, and he was on his way to being a star and a legend, both. And when I read about The Boy from Oz being a hit in Australia and that Judy was a character in it and so on, I thought, I have to do this. I never went after shows. I waited for them to come to me, but I went after The Boy from Oz, and I asked Jerry Schoenfeld if he would put in a good word for me with the producers, and he said he would. So they came, and
excuse me, but you went after this sight unseen, or did you do a lot of research on it?
I went after it sight unseen, just having Judy as a major character and about Peter Allen, that was enough for me. And
now let me just ask you this, because I watched part 1 last week, but have you seen the Australian movie on Peter Allen?
I think I saw it a long time ago, and I think it was made by Ben Gannon, who produced our show. He commissioned somebody to write a book, and then they did a special on ABC. It was called The Boy from Oz, actually.
That's right.
And
it's surprisingly pretty good.
Oh yeah, well, Ben Gannon was a first-class quality man. Anyway, he called his friend Robert Fox, who's a London producer, and said, I keep thinking these songs could make a biographical musical. Will you come along with me? And Robert Fox said, I will. So they began, working on doing it in New York, which was a very long process. And they flew me over to Sydney to see it. And Adrian Brian Brown and Joan Marcus were on the same plane. They were just mad. They were taking pictures of their food. It was great fun. And Adrian and I both thought it should have a star for New York. And so, initially we were going to do it with the man who played the lead in Australia, but it just didn't sit right. And they had approached Hugh Jackman originally, and he was just beginning a movie career. And by now he was, in the early beginnings of the movie career. And Ben Gannon called him, and surprisingly, he said, yes, I would be very interested. He and his wife had seen it, and he said to his wife, I think I made a mistake, and Hugh actually did a workshop. The workshop, we did 4 performances. Each performance was like a Broadway opening. There were like 100 people turned away, standing ovations. I mean, it was thrilling. And then, went to Broadway, and it was a resounding hit, and it really launched Hugh, I think, as a great Broadway star. And I saw it 35 times, and it was impossible to see it without going backstage to tell him how great he was. When somebody gives that kind of performance, you got to tell them. At least
Exactly. Well, you also, when we spoke before, you also talked about the trajectory of how his performance grew over the course of the run of the show.
Well, he just grew in stature and assurance, and he had a couple of sections where he ad-libbed with the audience, and his ad-lib sections were unerring. It just worked out perfectly. You can see an example of it on the Tonys when he brought I can't think of her name, Sarah Jessica Parker, is that her name? When he brought her up on stage, that was all ad-lib, and it was perfect. there was not one false move. And I remember once he brought Barbara Cook on the stage, and he said, she was a huge fan of the show. He said, "We have the greatest star of musical comedy here today, Barbara Cook, and I'd like you to come up here, Barbara." And she stood up, and she got a standing ovation. But she was so transfixed watching you that she was not aware of it. Right. She walked on the stage, and the next day I called her. I said, "I hope you know that yesterday you got a standing ovation for a show you aren't even in."
Well, I want to talk, about your career, looking back over this, and again, incredible book. Did you keep journals over the years, or as you sat down to write this book, was this all recall? How did you go back, and what was your process writing the book?
Well, I wrote the book over a period of 25 years. There were periods of 5 years when I wrote nothing. I did not keep a diary. I have an excellent memory. I also have Google. And I also called people and asked if they would share their recollection, and they're often quoted. And I have to say that the book is one of those rare things. It's the book I wanted. I like every molecule of it. I love the cover, beginning with the cover.
I love this book.
I looked at artwork to see what kind of thing I would like, and I found a poster for a show about Tupac Shakur that played the Palace, and I love the style of it, and so that's the style of my cover.
And when did you know that the book was ready to give birth? And you also did, and I love the fact that you did this through a GoFundMe campaign.
I did,
and which was amazing.
Well, it was amazing to me. I set a goal of $20,000 because, and a month to raise it, because if you don't raise all of it, you get nothing, and then people get their money back. And the $20,000 came in within 2 weeks.
Wow. So,
I was surprised. The book cost much more than that. But I don't mind. And I had, friends who helped me. I have my two riches in my life are wonderful friends and the talent that I've been able to work with.
Well, I was going to say, from where I sit, your name is mentioned, and you are so beloved and loved by so many people, and that's a testament to you and your work ethic and the way that you've dealt with people and the way you've treated people in this business. That can't be said of a lot of people, and a lot of that's come out, with some people over the past few years. How do you think that people are going to remember you? Or is that something that, no, seriously, or is that something that you even think about?
When you ask me that, I think of what Bernie Jacobs always said: "Dead is dead."
Well, you know the story about Sam Goldwyn, don't you?
People will, think about you and remember you for a few days, and then the world moves on. I mean, I have to say that I probably think of Bernie nearly every day. He's one of the great loves of my life, right up there with Judy. They both live right up here.
Well, going back to Judy for a moment, you maintained a relationship with Judy, and that continued on. And then how long did you remain with the fan club?
I quit the fan club about 1 year after I moved to New York, because when I was in it, I tried to be very objective about her. When she did a television performance that I didn't think was good or made an album, I would write honestly about it, and I opened the journal was called the Garland Gazette.
Right.
And I opened it up, and there was a happy birthday drawing. It was Judy on a throne with a tiara, a line of people handing her a globe with a bow on it. And I thought, I am out of here. This is not what I came for. And so I left the club, and really, I did not have a continuing personal relationship with her.
Oh, okay. I thought you did.
I reunited with her in 1967 to investigate whether she could play Jenny in a tour of the Three Penny Opera. And I found her, I just found her very discouraging, and didn't even bring it up. But I did continue to see her performances.
What was the last performance that you saw of hers?
I believe it was Garden State Parkway. And it was opening night. She only lasted 3 nights there. But, her performance style was just overwhelming, as always. The voice, of course, was a memory, as the Times said. I remember as she was singing the trolley song, she looked out at this place that was in the middle of nowhere, and she said, "To the end of the line."
Albert, I want to ask you, over the course of seeing so many changes, as I have too, in this business, what are the things that you think that have changed for the better in the business? And what are things that you just really miss from what were in place when you first arrived in New York?
Well, I retired. I always realized that my career would have a beginning and a middle and an end, and retiring was as natural to me as having the career. There would be a time when that was to happen. I experienced the change in the business, which was ruled. It was ruled by money because of things costing so much, and you had, instead of 1 or 2 real producers, you had 25 people who sold Chevy upholstery and wrote a check and thought they were producers, and I couldn't stand it.
Mm-hmm.
I liked collaboration with 2 people that knew what they were doing, not 25 people who wanted to put a button, pass out buttons saying, "Did she or didn't she?" Jeffrey Richards said to me, "Albert, the business has changed, and you seem angry." And I said, "I am angry," and so the last show I did was The Homecoming by Pinter, which was a very, very classy revival of the play. And I thought, I like ending with a play called The Homecoming. And so I did. Well, and I think I got out at exactly the right moment for me.
Well, today is also Edward Albee's birthday, so I want to give a nod to him as well. Liza Minnelli, Edward Albee, things that you've gleaned from both of them. Let's talk about that. That you think make them both unique in terms of what they bring to the table. Obviously, they're both incredible artists, but things about each of them that most people may not think about beyond the obvious.
I think of Liza as a warrior. I think she is brave. I have worked with her, and I think she was a very kind person. And when I was the fan club president, I made her an honorary member. And when we first came together, she said, "I still have my Garland Gazettes. Do you have yours?" Which I just thought was so sweet. And she was very, very kind to me. We took good care of each other. But I think she has enormous talent, and I think she has had to deal with things that she had nothing to do with,
right?
That she didn't choose to have happen, but they happened, and that's why I think of her as a warrior. And Albee, had demons of his own. I think he had a unique voice, and he never compromised. I think he stuck to his voice. And I was going to be the manager of Three Tall Women. I went up to see it at Woodstock with his agent Esther Sherman and a young producer named Michael Harvey, who was a friend of Edward's. And Michael was going to do it, and I was in the process of negotiating. And suddenly something strange was happening with the negotiation. And I had dinner with Michael, in which I wanted to tell him. and I looked at Michael and could see that he was dying. He had AIDS. I mean, I went into it knowing that he did, but I didn't know the progression was happening so quickly. And so, you know, Edward was graciously pulling away, and he ended up, you know, it's an exquisite play. I called it a diamond when I saw it, and I love the recent revival. Even
Oh, oh my God, did I love it?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think Joe Mantello is the best director of plays that we have.
I agree. I totally agree. Well, we are going to give away a copy of your book, autographed by you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually bring this screen on. And the word for today is curiosity. I'm always curious in this business, and I know you are too. So all you need to do is put in the hashtag curiosity and my homage to James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. I've got a few questions here for you, and we'll see what comes up. So the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is the strongest contribution that you feel that you have made to your profession?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. I thought maybe it was some unseen person.
No, it's definitely you.
I think the most important contribution any of us can make is leaving something to the literature. So I think the plays that I have done and Little Shop, I would have to include Little Shop, are the most important contributions because they are the lasting legacy.
That's great. What is the biggest why in your career?
Why do designers have to have so many assistants on contract for so long?
Good question. And if anyone has the answer, please let us know. What is the truest prediction that you have ever made or heard in this business?
Well, the truest prediction I ever made was when I was standing under the marquee of the Orpheum with Howard Ashman on opening night. And he said to me, "So we'll get the advance right, and then it'll close." And I said, "Howard, this is going to be the biggest hit of my career, and I hope one of the biggest of yours."
Wow, good for you. In which year of your life did you change the most?
Well, I would have to say 1988, the year that I found sobriety.
God bless you. I wish that my father had found sobriety. God bless you. What is the most beautiful sound that you've ever heard?
Judy Garland on her 2 Capitol albums, Miss Show Business and Judy.
Wow. I'm going to listen to those later. I'm going to listen to those. What is your greatest love story in the theater?
Oh, God. Well, the show that I worked with, that I managed, where the most love was involved, was a show called One Mo' Time. It was about Black vaudeville in the 1920s in New Orleans,
Mm-hmm.
and it ran at the Village Gate for 3.5 years, and we became a family, a true family, and love just abounded, and I will never forget it. It's the happiest experience of my life.
Great. What's the biggest surprise that you've ever had in this business?
I guess Bernie Jacobs giving me 3 raises in one phone conversation.
God bless him.
I'll say.
Oh. What is the worst pain that you've ever endured in this business, and how did you get through it?
Well, I guess I would have to say the treatment that Robert Harling accorded Kyle Rennick, the producer, and me, the general manager of Steel Magnolias. I've never understood it. He became very cruel to us, but our love for his show, his play was sufficient that was enough to carry us through. And I love how I felt wonderful about how we handled it, and that we even did it, because when it played at the WPA, the reviews were not that strong. But I have never understood what happened, and I made a general amends to him. I said, if whatever I did, I would like to make amends to you. I never heard a response, and he was on a panel with Vernell Bonaris, who was the author and director of One More Time, because they're both from Louisiana.
Mm.
And he said something nasty about me during the course of the panel. And Vernell went up to him afterward and said, Albert Poland is a very good friend of mine. And Harling said, how unfortunate.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
So that was hurtful.
Well, wow. Well, I asked you a question earlier, and you made a joke that when you're dead, you're dead. But I'm gonna go back there for a moment, because I want to know, what is the closest that you feel that you ever came to dying?
Oh, when I had a pancreatitis. I had 2 weeks of not knowing how I was going to get through the next minute.
Wow. Wow. Well, Albert, I'm so glad that you made it.
Thank you.
I love this book, and I am in love with you. And my husband knows it. So that's not a secret. So anyway, I'm going to give away a book, everyone. Don't go anywhere for a moment. And this is how this is done. I put my hands up here so everyone knows that I don't pick the winner. And we'll show you how this is done. Oh my God. And he's won again. I keep giving this guy a award. So just send me a private message just to say I'm the winner. And then we'll get you in touch with Albert, and he will autograph it and get it to you. And thank you so much for watching again today. Albert, this has been a real treat. I hope you've enjoyed this as much. And we had no technical outages today. Nothing. So everyone, I want to thank you all for tuning in. If this is your first time here, I hope it will not be your last time. Please subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment on YouTube, letting me know what you think of today's show, and share this with your friends. Tell everyone else about this. I also end every show by telling everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. This is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to go to Amazon.com or call your favorite bookseller, and I'd like you to order 2 copies of this book. I'd like you to keep 1 copy for yourself, and I'd like you to send another copy to the 3rd name on your Facebook friends list. And then I want you to call that friend. I don't want you to email them. I don't want you to send a private message, not an inbox message, but I want you to call them. And I want you to let them know what they mean to you. Because as my dear friend Sean Moniger says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. And I always say, if you're going to go out in a boat, make sure you bring a skipper along. So Albert, I'm going to leave the screen, and I'm going to give you the final word. Anything you want to say about anything that we talked about today that you want to build upon? Anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had? Or just any message you want to put out to anyone who's watching right now? Don't worry about how to end the show. As soon as you say goodbye, the credits will roll. And I want to have you over for dinner soon. Can we make that happen?
Absolutely.
I'm a great cook. So we're going to make that happen. Don't go anywhere, everyone. Albert's got the final word. Thank you for being here.
I've loved this. I just want to express, Richard is new in my circle of friends. And I just wish that the world was as kind and caring as Richard is. It's inspiring to me, and it makes me very happy. It's very gratifying. And I kind of like to repeat something that I talked about earlier, and that is, pursue your dream. Anything else is a waste of time. Pursue your passion. and read the road signs. If your passion changes, then change directions and go for it. And I wish much love to all of you, and thank you for watching us, and goodbye.